going on, listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Unfounded Podcast. My name is Chris Turner. I am your host, and I hope you're doing good out there. I hope you're staying safe, staying healthy, and getting back into the swing of things as we roll out of this coronavirus craziness. I'm doing good. Sitting here in Denver, Colorado, waiting to move. I'm going to be moving in almost exactly a week from today. What is it, Tuesday? Yeah, a little over a week from today. And I'm kind of procrastinating a little bit, to be quite honest. I got some boxes yesterday, and I told myself I was going to start packing last night, and I didn't. And now I'm sitting here recording a podcast when I should probably be packing, but we're going to get to that soon, hopefully. Procrastination is a bad thing, and actually, that may be a good topic to start off with. For some reason, I started talking about procrastination, but we're also going to be, as we've been doing for the last two episodes, focusing on the 7 deadly sins. And we're going to be looking today at, let me see actually what we're looking at. 7 deadly sins. That's not right. Hold on one second. 7 deadly sins. Sorry guys, hold on one second. There it is. It brought me to the anime webpage for some reason first, and I just was on this like 2 days ago. All right, so this week we're going to be talking about greed. Yeah, and greed's a simple one, honestly. Relative, if you look at kind of the length of each of these descriptions relative to all the other ones, it's definitely the shortest. But I was talking about procrastination. Let's start with that. So it's one of those areas. You know, I don't remember where I heard this, but I think it's some really, really good advice. And it's something to the effect, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's something to the effect of never walk by something that you could complete in 5 minutes. So let's say you're walking around your house and I don't know, let's see, there's some dirty dishes in the sink, like 3 or 4 dirty dishes. It's under 5 minutes. You should just knock them out right then. It's the best bet to do is to not continue doing what you were doing, to prioritize the thing that takes less than 5 minutes, because whatever you were doing most likely is not that time constrained, right? Could be, but it most likely isn't. And a lot of times we treat what we're doing in the now as if it is time constrained, so that we can't adjust at all. We can't go and, complete that little 5-minute task as we see it. We'll do that later. We put it onto a list and push it off later. We call this procrastination. But there's really, I think, a practical way to approach it. And it's something like that. Whatever your time frame is. It could be 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes. But in my head, it's like, if I can do this in 5 minutes, man, let's do it. And it's really hard to kind of implement in your life too. It takes a while because, like I said, I think procrastination actually comes from look at that. Every time we do this podcast, I think procrastination comes from it's one of those tricky things because I think people have good intentions, when they procrastinate. They generally intend to complete whatever the task is at a future date. Problem is, like I said, we tend to prioritize what we're currently doing. We put an emphasis on it, and because of that, no matter what, if you continue to act in that way, if you put something off to the future date, you're going to be doing something else when it comes up again. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I put that in the best way, but you get what I'm saying, I think. Like that, and so you're putting it off, but you're not changing your behavior. So when you come across the thing again, you're going to react the same way, right? You'll be like, oh, I'll put it off. It's a 5-minute thing. I'll put it off again. It's like, no, flip that. If it's a 5-minute thing, do it now, right? Because there's almost nothing that important that you would have to, you couldn't stop for 5 minutes and finish that. So, there's a practicality, I think, to this idea. If it takes less than 5 minutes, complete it. And I think this doesn't only apply in like the physical world, right? The material world. It kind of applies in a spiritual sense too. It's like when you're going about your day, don't avoid or don't look past the little tiny opportunities to interact with the world in a loving manner, because it exists like all around you. Like, for instance, this is a good example, and you can I think you can go on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, and see this, but I don't know if it's public or not. I can post it on the Unfounded podcast page. But yesterday I'm sitting, I have this window and I look out of it. I'm looking out of it right now, and it's really pretty because there's this lake, that kind of goes behind there, and I have this nice tree. Well, I like to look out of it while I'm, doing the podcast. I'll look out at the lake, and it helps me think for some reason. And just yesterday I was, I had the blinds open, and I'm sitting here, and I was actually getting ready, and Dixie starts to bark, and I'm on the ground floor. So usually she barks quite a bit because there's people that walk by my room. It's kind of a little creepy actually, but there's quite a few people that go by my room. And so she starts barking. I assume it's people. Well, I kind of ignore it for 5-10 minutes, and she keeps on barking. So finally I get kind of annoyed, and I walk in there to be like, Dixie, stop. And I look up, and there's this squirrel. Like, I don't know if you've seen that da 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 squirrel, like that meme where he like flips around and like looks super serious. It was like that squirrel's face, but he was staring at me. It's massive. I mean, he's probably from tail to head, probably 2-3 feet long. He's a big squirrel, like, you know what I mean? And he's just staring at me, and he's probably 6 feet away from my window, and he's staring at Dixie and just kind of wagging his tail. And then he'd look at me and he'd wag his tail, and I'm like, what in the world? And then I stop and I kind of took a Snapchat of it. And then I put the Snapchat down. I'm still looking at him. He's still doing it. He's checking me out. He's looking at me like really intently through the window. And me and Dixie, and Dixie's like staring at him like, what is this squirrel doing? And I don't think there's really a point to the story necessarily, but the reason I bring it up is that it inspired inside of me this feeling of love. I felt loved by a squirrel. You know what I mean? Because he focused on me, or her, whatever gender the squirrel was. I don't, but there's like, I think there's this, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, but there's something to like the gaze of people, right? Like what you look at, what you show your intent, what you look at, you show intent. What you focus on is what you give energy to. And it's kind of like the idea that Joe Rogan talks about with bandwidth, except in the spiritual sense. You give energy to things and people and ideas by focusing on them, by looking at them in a basic sense. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. My dog is making some noises. Dixie, can you please stop that? Thank you, man. It's a little noisy, okay? Thanks. I can't stand, so this mic picks up a lot of very, very minuscule noises that you guys probably can't hear, and one of them is my dog likes to, like clean herself, lick herself, give her a bath, have herself a bath. Like, it's just tongue noises. And that's like the worst noise in the world, you know what I mean? Especially if you're trying to think, it just cuts right through your thought, and it just ends it, right? Anyway, sorry for the interruption. Let's get back on track. You give energy to what you show intent to, like what you look at. And there was something about even the act of a squirrel showing me that much attention, which called forth in me this, like, it made me feel good about myself in a weird way. And you can see this in dogs too, and I think that's partially why dogs are considered man's best friend, is because you can see in their gaze, like the way they look at their owner. If you ever see a dog that it's utter love is what you see in dogs' eyes when they look at their owner. When they come home, that longing, with that like relief, all that like wrapped up in their eyes, you see. And when a dog shows you that kind of intensity, it gives you something. It gives you energy. It's like you create this connection. It's like symbiotic connection where you feed off of each other, and kind of nurture each other in a way. There's this resonance quality to it. I think that's what attracts you to people and things and animals. But you got to watch what you give what you point your gaze towards, I guess is what I'm saying. Be careful what you look at, or at least pay attention to what you're looking at. I know I'm kind of talking off in the clouds, but what I mean more in the practical sense is like what you pay attention to, what you're paying attention to. There's a lot of things in this world that can kind of seize your gaze and suck the energy out of you. There's people that can do that too, right? But there's things, there's habits, there's vices that can do that. There's organizations, there's industries, there's institutions that can do that. There's, anything you can imagine can like suck energy out of you if it has some, if you're not harmonized with it in the right way, I think the most important aspect of that is in the people's like interpersonal communication, interaction. I don't know if you ever you may have to think hard about this, but I want you to think about a time when you felt really ashamed. Right? Think about a time when you were like really ashamed of something. There's this feeling you'll get where you don't want to look at anybody. You look down. People that are in this like shameful kind of depressed position, they hunch over, they look down at the ground, and they won't look at people in the eye. And I think there's a reason for that. There's a deep reason for that. I felt it. I know. I lived a big chunk of my life feeling like I couldn't look people in the eye because I felt ashamed, deeply ashamed about something. That was, after unpacking it, was not really what I thought it was. It wasn't the thing to be afraid of. I made it bigger by running away from it. You see somebody's true intentions in their eyes. You can't hide it. There's actually some scientific basis for this too, especially in the idea of attraction. I think they've proven, let me look this up, eye dilation and attraction. Pupil dilation is what it really is. Pupil dilation. I'm sure you've heard of this before, but if you haven't, once you do, I'm sure you'll notice this in people or your loved ones. Let me find one that's like seems somewhat legit. Medical news today. Let's go ahead and do this one. Medical news today. All right, so this is Medical News Today article. Let's see what the author is. Doesn't have an author listed. Okay. Dilated pupils meaning, is it a sign of love? So there's a lot of causes for dilated pupils. Medications can do that. Eye injuries can do that. Neurological conditions and brain injuries can do that. But does it show attraction? This says, eye contact has long been central to human interactions. Changes in emotion might cause pupil dilation. The autonomic nervous system triggers various involuntary responses during emotions, such as fear or arousal. Some research suggests that pupil dilation is one of these involuntary responses to arousal or attraction. For example, one 2012 study recruited 325 men and women with varying sexual orientations. The researchers played erotic videos to the participants while monitoring their pupil size. The study found that their erotic videos led to pupil dilation in the participants. The team showed that bisexual men and heterosexual women had dilated pupils in response to erotic videos that included people of either sex. Another study, this time in the journal Evolution of Human Behavior, focused on associations between pupil dilation and sexual attraction. The researchers found that it was possible to determine sexual interest from the size and darkness of the pupil. Pupil size also appears to respond to hormonal changes. One study recruited 14 women to view arousing pictures on a computer screen on different occasions. Half of the women were taking hormonal birth control pills. Women not taking birth control pills had dilated pupils while viewing arousing pictures during ovulation. This did not occur in women taking birth control pills. That's very interesting. Whoa. That's really interesting. Let's table that, right? But that's an interesting idea because there's a lot of debate on some of the second order effects, third order effects of contraception, things like the pill itself, and its effect on society and that kind of stuff filtering down as the years go on, as it becomes more ubiquitous. This is an interesting kind of side effect that we may have not readily identified, but could be very critical in the mating process, right? that a very critical part of the mating process, right? Women not taking birth control pills had dilated pupils while viewing arousing pictures during ovulation. This did not occur in women taking birth control pills. The reason I'm bringing up the dilation of the pupils is because I think this is partially what you pick up in people when you look at them in the eye. There's this communication that goes on that's kind of subconscious, that it may have something to do with the dilation of the pupil, the size of it, or whatever, but it triggers an idea that, hey, this person might like me or this person might not, right? Also, how long they hold their gaze, right? Where they look on your face. They look at your lips a lot, that kind of stuff, right? Like you I'm sure you've noticed this in people. Now, I'm going to read a little bit more here. The study therefore suggests that hormonal changes could influence arousal and pupil dilation. There is also some evidence to suggest that pupil dilation may indicate trust. A study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences suggests that pupil size changes play a role in trust formation. It remains unclear why pupil dilation might be involved in attraction. It could be a result of hormonal changes. However, many other factors can also affect pupil dilation. For example, research also suggests that paying attention to someone can influence pupil size. It could be easy to mistake paying attention for attraction. That's interesting as well. So there's a good point. Not necessarily like definitive if your pupils are dilated that you're attracted to the person. Could be just you focusing intently on them. More research in this area will be necessary to establish whether pupil dilation is a sign of attraction or a result of other factors such as hormones or involuntary bodily responses. So that's really interesting, I thought. Like I said, there's no listed author here, but I will post the link for this for you guys. And oh no, I'm sorry, right here. It's Aaron Condola. And this was written in April 27, 2020. It's fairly new. So thank you, Aaron, for that. And I will post a link to his article so you guys can read that on your own if you'd like. Anyway, I think that's really interesting, right? There's this communication that goes on that's almost subconscious. I think there's a spiritual component to that as well. I think that there's communication or like an identity that's stored in the eye, that you see somebody's deeper self. Kind of, if you want to refer to it as the soul, you can see the soul in the eyes. You can also see the soul leave the eyes. Right? Like at the moment of death. One of the ways you can tell something is dead is by looking at its eyes. It'll glaze over, it'll turn glossy, almost cloudy, that kind of a thing. There's this lack of life. You can see the life in the sparkle in the eye. And you can also see somebody that's in a deep depression or a very dark place by the lack of light in their eyes. I promise you that. You may notice it now, but I think it's hard to define this as definitive. But I'm not saying that anybody that has dark eyes or a very dark eye color, is in a dark place. But because there's people that have very dark brown eyes, right? Or really dark blue eyes or something like that, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. It's a shade. It's a loss of reflection almost that you can see in people's eyes when they're in a really dark, kind of evil place, I would describe it. And I think all that communication is readily, it's right there in front of you. You just have to look for it, I think that's an example of how the spiritual world interacts kind of on a daily basis, but we constantly write it off as something material. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, enough people think that eyes relate and communicate in a deeper way to fund, actually use money to fund studies based on it. And they found evidence that suggests that maybe it does, right? The problem is they don't know the mechanism. And the only mechanism they have is this dilation. So that's where it gets hazy. Because it's like, oh, we can't explain the mechanism, so if we can't explain the mechanism, it doesn't exist, right? I disagree. You know what I mean? One mechanism you've defined, the dilation. Yes, I think that may relate to some way in attraction, right? But what I'm talking about is something deeper, like I just explained to you, right? There's communication and energy that's passed on through the eyes. You can see somebody's true intent in their eyes, in their gaze. Like, have you ever people watch? You know what I mean? This is going to sound creepy. I don't do it very often. But if you're out in a big crowd or something like that, it's always interesting to watch people because you'll find that we define what is important by what we look at. And we do it in a social setting. We don't realize we're doing it. But like when people walk around, it's kind of like if you're on the freeway and you're driving and there's a car accident, everybody slows down to look. Nobody wants to see gore, but they're kind of looking for it. You know what I mean? And everybody else, in a line, you just like check. Everybody slows down, looks, slows down, looks, slow down, looks, right? It's same kind of thing happens in any crowd. Let's say you're out in the middle of New York City and like I don't even a loud noise, but let's say somebody just points randomly up at the sky. You're going to see this cascade effect of people looking up, right? There's a practical way that our gaze defines things that are important in the world. I just think there's also a connection to the impractical. You can see somebody's intent in their eyes. Have you ever looked at the picture of Manson? You know what I'm talking about, right? All right, after he carved the swastika into his forehead, Charlie Manson. There's this one picture, it's iconic. Actually, he doesn't have it in his forehead yet. I think this is right after he was arrested. But you look in this man's eyes. I'll post the picture for you so you guys know exactly which picture I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm going to post, this is a youmustrememberthispodcast.com, but it just has this picture I'm talking about on it. It looks like it's another podcast. But this picture of Charles Manson, man, you can see in his eyes. You look at it and there's this mania. But what's really scary about Manson, and I think what's really scary about a lot of these kind of people, is you don't see the darkness I was talking about necessarily. Like when I look at his eyes, I don't see that, like I said, the lack of light. It's actually the opposite. It's like this person's, and if you ever read about I'm in the middle of that book, Chaos, that's just came out about great book, right? It's just about the Manson murders, but there's so much more to that story. My goodness. But in reading that, you find out that Manson thought of himself as kind of a reincarnated Jesus Christ, right? He thought he was a savior, and he thought that he was going to kind of save the world and start helter-skelter, a race war, essentially. And that the family, which was this group that murdered the Tates and all them, and I forget what the other family was that got murdered. Sorry about that. I should know. But anyway, he thought he was like this. He was manic, right? Like he thought he had this mania that he thought he was Jesus Christ himself. You can see it in his eyes if you look at him. It's not a darkness; it's actually a light, but it's like an unconstrained light. It's like somebody believing they are the light. Yeah, that's what it looks like. And I'm pretty sure Charles Manson would have described himself as that. I'm pretty sure. You can see it in this picture. Anyway, I'm going to get off of that. I don't know why I'm going down this road, but look at people's eyes, man. They'll show you something about them. They'll show you they will show you what their true intent is. Just look at their eyes. You stare at somebody's eyes for long enough, whatever idea pops in your head, trust it. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go back to the 7 deadly sins. Let's see. Greed. So let's go on. Like I said, I'm reading these somewhat in order. I started with gluttony and went on to lust next. The actual order is lust, then gluttony. So I switched those up, right? And this is an order of severity as perceived in the works like Dante's Inferno and things like that. So, greed. The definition for here: greed, also known as avarice, cupidity, or covetousness, that is such a hard word, is like lust and gluttony, a sin of desire. However, greed, as seen by the church, is applied to an artificial, rapacious desire and pursuit of material possessions. Thomas Aquinas wrote, "Greed is a sin against God, just as all mortal sins, inasmuch as a man condemns things eternal for the sake of temporal things." In Dante's Purgatory, the penitents are bound and laid not farce. The penitents are bound and laid face down on the ground for having concentrated excessively on earthly thoughts. Hoarding of materials or objects, theft and robbery, especially by means of violence, trickery, or manipulation of authority, are all actions that may be inspired by greed. Such misdeeds can include simony, where one attempts to purchase or sell sacraments, including holy orders and therefore positions of authority in the church hierarchy. In the words of Henry Edward, avarice plunges a man deep into the mire of this world so that he makes it to be his god. As defined outside Christian writings, greed is an inordinate desire to acquire or possess more than one needs, especially with respect to material wealth. Like pride, it can lead to not just some, but all evil. So as I last episode, we were talking about lust, and I was like, this is kind of the root for all of these. Well, what's interesting, there's a lot of depth in this idea because you find kernels of each of these sins in other sins. You can see how each of these sins can grow into the others, kind of complement the other ones. And if you combine all of these together, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride, think of what that figure would look like. What that person is, embodied. The figure you're going to have a real hard time getting out of your head is a figure of some kind of satanic or evil figure. The devil himself is what this embodiment is. That's what they would. That's what the Christian interpretation of this would suggest. Now, partially, I think the reason I'm bringing up and going over the 7 deadly sins is I think how we lead good lives is by recognizing how often these traits pop up in each of us. I'm not bringing them up to say that I don't do these things or to preach to you or tell you what you need to do. I'm bringing them up because I think there's something very basically true about trying to avoid this in your life. It's worked for me. It's taken me from a place where I was in a very dark and depressed and evil place, I think, and it's pulled me out of it. It's made me feel better. It's given me a vector. It's made me feel like I can go on. If any of you have ever felt that you couldn't, you might want to see if any of these align with you. Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. I guarantee you, if you're honest with yourself, you'll find one of those. Just lying there, controlling you. It's part of your ego. It's a thing you'll hide from yourself and tell you aren't. I'm not that. The ego wants to remain intact. It wants to pretend like it's in control. And so it'll hide from you the ways that you regain true control, right? Ways you refine your true self. The ways you do that is through, choosing the thorny path, as I've described before. Jordan Peterson describes it quite often. Choosing to confront these things inside yourself because they exist. If you're telling yourself they don't exist, you're wrong. I promise you are. You're a human being. Are you an alien? Are you a dog? Are you a cat? No, you're a human being just like me. I'm not inherently evil. I don't think you are either. But I also don't think you're inherently good. And I don't think I am either. I think we're some kind of mixture. And that what we choose defines whether we're good or evil. Kind of pushes you a little bit over the line to one side or the other. It's a game of inches. I posted a picture on my Instagram not too long ago. Let me pull it up really quick. It's actually on my Facebook. This is my personal Facebook, I think, too. I can share this for you guys on another one. But I want to read it for you verbatim because it's a quote. And I might be wrong about that. Sorry about that, guys. Let's maybe not do that. But anyway, don't ever try to confuse yourself with perfection. Don't think it's attainable. Don't let yourself believe that perfection is attainable. Some people confuse it with hope, I think. Well, I need hope. Here it is. It's by Salvador Dali. Have no fear of perfection. You'll never reach it. Exactly. You won't. Neither will I. No human being living will. We're not meant to be perfect. Life wouldn't exist if we were perfect. There would be no point to it. There would be no purpose to anything. Perfection is something you actually don't want. Perfection in a weird way is hellish. Perfection would drive you insane. Because we need things to do. Most people don't think enough in depth about these ideas. They chase the ideal of the idea. They make an ideal out of an ideal. You know, I see this everywhere. You know, you can see this in the political sentiment all around, but I think I see it the most heavily right now in this coronavirus pandemic and the fear. In the desire to eliminate the virus, you know, which I'm sure we'll do in some form or another, but you're not eliminating viruses. You're not eliminating virus as a thing, period, which is what we're trying to do. There's danger in any idea that confuses itself with perfection. There's an evil inherent within it, because there's a control that takes hold. There's a possession that happens in that. It's sly. Like I said, it's a game of inches. Before you know it, you go from being on the good or right side of history to the bad or wrong side of history. All the while thinking you're doing the right thing. People don't become villains intentionally. They trip into it. The way you figure that out is by trying to figure out how you would become the evilest person in history. You first have to accept that you could be. You got to accept that you could be the evilest person that ever lived. You could be. You have all of that capacity inside of you. You have the capacity to do the most utterly evil and despicable things you could ever imagine. It's all within you right now. You also have all of the opposite capacity. You have the capacity for our idea of perfection within you, but you don't have the practical means to implement it. You aren't the thing that can implement it. But we can conceive of the idea of perfection, and there's something meaningful in that. The fact that we can even conceive that idea, perfect. It's like, why can't we conceive of a number of infinity? Like, why can't you think of that number? Like, why can't you think of something bigger than big? You know what I mean? But you can think of perfect. Which perfect denotes proper and necessary placement of things. It's like there's a complexity in perfect that's unattainable in the human being. I think that's partially what it is. It's like, you know, I keep on bringing this up. I don't mean to. It's like beating a dead horse. But I think one of the mistakes in the idea of Marxism and communism, it latches onto this idea of perfect because we can conceive it, but then it tries to mobilize it and enact it in the world, and that's where it goes wrong. Because it confuses and believes that human beings have the ability to actually... We can conceive the idea of perfect, but we can't define how it happens. I don't think we have the ability to define everything that's going on. It's like we don't have the wiring or something. You know what I mean? We're not a thing that's meant to know that. You know? There's a purpose to us. I think there's a deep purpose to human beings. We're not random. We're not random. Huh. Sorry, guys. Just got a lot of ideas going through my head right now. We aren't random. Amidst all of the uncertainty of this season, something beautiful is growing here. And one day you will look back and see that all along, all by grace, you were blooming. That's Morgan Harper Nichols. I don't know why I felt compelled to read that. I posted that on one of my Facebook pages earlier. I think it's an incredibly beautiful poem. And I think it's because it speaks of this idea of forging yourself. It brings this idea that the things that are put in your way, the things that you perceive as unfair, unwarranted, unnecessary, the things that you don't want to do are exactly the things you need to do. In a weird way, the things we're afraid of is what gives us purpose. If you had nothing to fear, this is just a new idea. If you had nothing to fear, I don't know if you'd be motivated to do anything. Like, it's what gets you to move. It's like, that's one of the problems they had in the Soviet Union towards the end, as it was kind of falling apart, is they couldn't motivate people to do anything. It's like people had jobs, but there was no motivation to do them. You know what I mean? It's like, well, why? Because I got a house. I got a, you guys gave me all that shit. I got food, so I'm just gonna kind of chill. And I make light of it, but that's exactly the attitude that permeated the end of the Soviet Union, led to its downfall. How do you get people to move? You don't have anything to motivate them. What people will usually turn to is the stick. You know what I mean? It's either the carrot or the stick, right? Well, you can't use a carrot in a communist system because that makes people unequal. So you use the stick. The funny thing is, that also makes people unequal, but hey, lesser of two evils, I guess. Greed. We're getting off topic, Chris. Greed. There's so many things in this world that we can get obsessed by. It's like shiny things, lures. I think of a fishing lure. That's what I think of. And who's on the other end of that pole? If the fishing lure is the things that you're attracted to that look like there's something that gives you sustenance, but could actually lead to your downfall, your death. I think there's a lot of things, and I think the world is more populated with those kind of things right now than it's ever been before. There's more temptation out there, I think, than there's ever been before. Or maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just there's more variety. Same types of temptations with more specificity. You can pick your poison. You know what I mean? But the idea of greed is focusing on the material world too much. That's what this is kind of saying. Greed is a sin against God, just as all mortal sins, and as much as man condemns things eternal for the sake of temporal things. So what it's saying, from what I'm getting from that, is when you sacrifice what you believe in for what's right in front of you, it's something. No, it's not that. It's like it's giving up. It's giving up eternity for the now. It's like trading away the sanctity of your soul, the thing that exists that's eternal within you, for the thing that's now, that's temporary, that's fleeting, that's breakable, that has to play by the rules of entropy. It's placing emphasis on those things that are fleeting, that'll go away, and that have zero intrinsic value. Not properly recognizing the intrinsic value that lies not only within yourself, but all around you. That kind of greed actually leads you into a dark place. All of these do. There's this lure to it, right? There's an unquenchable quality to greed, right? To all of these, and are unquenchable. Wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, lust. It's like this thirst you can't quench. It's an itch you can't freaking scratch. You know that feeling? Ugh, you don't want that inside of you. This is a good example of what I think that was trying to say, that quote I just read you. Such misdeeds include simony, where one attempts to purchase or sell sacraments, including holy orders and therefore positions of authority in the church hierarchy. So this would be, people with positions of power within the hierarchy of church historically that would sell favors in those positions, holy favors, blessings, things like that, absolution for money, right? Trading away the eternal kind of sacred thing for the temporal, valueless thing. This, for some reason, this one, like, this sin scares the shit out of me, like a lot more than the other ones I've encountered. Greed does, because I don't know why. I'm trying to figure out why, guys. I'm sorry there's a lot of pauses in this podcast, but I feel like I'm supposed to get something out here. I think greed is very tightly linked to the ego. Again, all of these are in some way, but I want to talk about the ego now with greed, because I think partially what inspires this hoarding of things and the constant need for accumulation is like insufficiency. That a deep insufficiency of some sort. It's an insecurity, I think, of not being enough, or needing to gather things to show your worth, needing to have representations of your worth and value of your achievement. I think that's where people go wrong with greed. I think that's where greed gets them in this, because you don't feel like you're doing something wrong, You can feel justified in it, I feel like. Everybody, like I said, everybody's had this happen before, where you get the nice car, or you get, you go buy anything that you're proud of, right? And you want to show people, right? Because it boosts you in some way. It shows you, look, achievement, trophy, medal, progress. It's some kind of delineating line that people like to identify as like, look, I'm here now, and then look, I'm here now, and this is now equals my worth, right? It's a very dangerous game to play with yourself, though, because you'll start to believe that if you play it for too long. If you try to use things to represent you and how valuable you are, you'll actually start to believe that you're only you're only as valuable as the things you have around you. And why that's dangerous is because those things are fleeting. They abide by the laws of entropy. They will go away or change. And what that means is that you will change or go away. That you will degrade with those things. You attach yourself to them in a deep way. And as those things degrade, you do too. Again, what you focus on is what you give your energy to. It's what you become. You're so much better than a thing. Why do we not call people things? You don't hear people describing a person as a thing. Hey, look at that thing. If you were to do that, it would seem like you're undermining kind of the value of the person in a deep way. It's a sinful way. It feels wrong to do that. Hey, look at that thing. Right? If I was to say that, why? Because you're more valuable than things. You aren't a thing. You're a person. You're a human being. You're a soul. You're a life. Your perspective. Your depth. I think you're God. And we all are. Nobody individually. Don't confuse yourself with God. It's a different thing. But that idea is inside of you. If you don't like the term God, replace it with whatever term you want. Divine. Bigger. Something greater than us. Whatever you want to describe it as. The blanks we haven't filled in yet. There's a lot of ways you can describe God. That question mark in the back of your head. That thing that says, well, maybe ghosts are real. That sensation you've had, well, maybe I should go check out a palm reader. Right? That weird curiosity you have inside of you. The reason you're listening to this podcast, if you are listening to this podcast, there's a reason for it. I promise you that. Because this is not a big podcast. It's like 100 people that listen to this a week. Okay? Full disclosure. I'm not doing it to get paid, and I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm doing it because this is my truth, and this is my meaning. This is what I'm supposed to do. For some reason, this is what I'm being called to do. If you're listening to this, there is a reason you are listening to this. I don't know why that is. I can't define that for you. You got to figure that out. But there is a reason you're listening to this and not Joe Rogan's podcast. Or Bill Burr, or any of the other 1 million, 2 million, 5 million listener shows that would be much easier for you to find and probably much more interesting, honestly. Irrelevant to the pop culture, at least, right? I mean, you'd have an interview that you could listen to somebody that you're actually interested in, some random guy spiel on a mic. Denver, Colorado, right? Anyway, I kid, right? You can see how if you rely or you tie yourself, your value too much to greed, right? To accumulating things and representing those things as your value, or allowing that thing to define how valuable you are. As soon as you start to lose those things, you're gonna keep those things by any means necessary, because those things become you. Somebody tries to steal your car, oh, you're taking that car back. You know, you see people all the time. They'll say, like, if somebody ever stole my car, I'd kill him, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Really? It's a car. You're going to kill something with innate value over something that could be remade. Literally right now, it's being remade every 1 minute and 30 seconds off of an assembly line. You really? Okay. You're right. That's not evil. You know what I mean? People don't see this inside of themselves. Or they'll laugh it off. They'll joke about it. They'll be like, no, I was kidding. No, you weren't. You're saying that because now people see that. You don't want people to associate you with bad. So you hide. It'll lead you to do weird things, really evil things, other sins like this, to retain that. To retain those things, right? Those things around you, the car and the house and whatever it is. You'll do bad shit to keep that. Or maybe you'll just sacrifice some other version, something that could make you happy for those things, which will lead you into a dark pit, into a depression, to an anger, to envy, or pride, you know, or wrath. We got to watch this inside of ourselves. Greed's a really hard one. I mean, we want it all, right? Like, there's this unquenchable thirst we all have. It's an innate thing. It's something inside of us all. Playing into it, allowing it to run free. It's like allowing lust, your primal self, to go unfettered, uncontrolled. It's the same kind of thing. You know, you are meant to control and align yourself, organize yourself. You're meant to exhibit restraint over a thing that should otherwise be unrestrained. And a thing that should, left to its own devices, act as an animal. The thing that makes us unique in this kingdom, like I said, is our ability to conceive complex ideas, to conceive a God, the idea of God. That's human, uniquely human. No other animal has the idea of God, or speaks of God, or worships a God. We made that. That's as human as music, as I said before. Starting to run out of juice here, guys, I think. So I'm going to start wrapping it up. How much are we at? Oh, it's quite a long one. Anyway. I really like this. I really like the 7 deadly sins. I think this is extremely practical and useful. Maybe not practical, but it's useful. I try to make it more practical. The 7 virtues. Let's bring up the associated virtue. With greed. What is associated virtue? There it is. For greed, it'd be charity, which makes sense, right? Let's read about charity. In Christian theology, charity is considered as one of the 7 virtues and is understood by Thomas Aquinas as the friendship of man for God, which unites us to God. He holds it as the most excellent of the virtues. Further, Aquinas holds that the habit of charity extends not only to the love of God, but also to the love of our neighbor. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines charity as the theological virtue by which we love God above all things for his own sake, and our neighbor as ourselves for the love of God. You love your neighbor as you love God. That's what that's saying, right? Why would you do that? Because you are God. Anyway, the charity, generosity, right? Being generous with, and you're immediately going to think of like money, right? Give some people some money. No. I think there's ways you can be charitable with your time and your energy and your focus. I find very often that when you engage in conversation in the modern day, you'll run into people that they don't listen. You know what I mean? Like you'll talk, and you can literally watch them like tune out until you're done talking, and then there's like a little break or a pause because they're not actively listening. So there's a delay when they're like, "Oh shit, they stopped talking. Now I got to say something." You know what I mean? It's like a second or 2 or 3 second delay, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. So you weren't listening to me, right?" I don't know if you guys noticed this before, but I see it quite a bit. I think it's because we have a lot of distractions in the modern world, and we haven't defined properly how important those engagements are. The conversation, how meaningful one other person, another perspective is, that it is really critical, that it is one of your needs, not your wants. It's a basic need, another perspective. And that when we don't value that, when we ignore it, when we don't properly listen when somebody's speaking, or we don't properly incorporate ideas or try to bounce off ideas, when we approach those kind of things with with bad intent in some way, or a disinterest, we don't properly value that thing, right? We're not, you give energy, or you define value in what you look at, what you pay attention to. And you see that people do this all the time. They'll be looking at their phone. Somebody's talking to them, and they're looking at their phone, right? Like, you're not important. That's what you're saying. You're not important. I'm more important. My time's more important. This thing is more important than you. A living, breathing, talking, speaking human being is more important right here. That's evil. If you let that go for long enough, and that is happening way too much around the world right now. Because what does it do? It leads you to focus on yourself. It leads you to tell you that your world's more important than that person's. Block them out. They're not important. What they're saying doesn't mean anything. Just wait until they stop talking and then say something back. You treat everything as if it's a game, as if it's jovial. Like it doesn't matter. That's a dangerous thing to do. Because it does matter. Life is the most serious thing you'll ever do, but you also can't take it too seriously. It's a balance. You're not in that much of a control that you could take it completely seriously, but you also can't treat it as if it's something that is there for your entertainment. Right? That's there to serve you. That you don't have to interact with it anyway. I don't know why I brought that up in the context of greed. I think it's because I think there's a lot of I don't know. In some ways, I just feel like there's a relation to the modern perspective, the modern human being, the modern individual. This go, go, go mentality, this stay distracted mentality, you know. It's greedy in some way, and I'm trying to figure out how. It's greedy because it doesn't recognize properly the importance of other people and every other person in the world. It allows you to think that your world is kind of like you are the center of the universe is kind of what it leads to, I think. There's this greed in the idea that you are the center of the universe. Like I am the universe, like I am God. That's where it leads to, you know what I mean? Anyway, let's leave it there, yeah? I think that's a good one. Hold on. I want to read this real quick. Just popped up. Caritas, the altruistic love. The phrase Deus Caritas, 1 John 4:8, is translated in the King James Version as God is love, and in the Douay-Rheims Bible as God is charity. Thomas Aquinas does not simply equate charity with love, which he holds as a passion, not a virtue. The King James Version uses both the words charity and love to translate the idea of... I can't read that. Most other English translations, both before and since, do not. Instead, throughout, they use the same more direct English word love. So, like, there's this interchanging of love and charity. God is love, God is charity. And I think in the charity part, you know, God is the interaction of people. It's that exchange of energy, that resonance between people, right? It's the universe playing with itself in a weird way. You know what I mean? So with that, let's leave it there, guys. I know this was kind of a long one, and I did a lot of pausing. Sorry about that. I've had a lot on my mind lately. Like I said, I've been very stressed in a sense because I got a lot of changes coming on. So apologies if this was at all different for you, but I'm going to continue to pump these out as much as I can and try to use like whatever kind of energy or place I'm in to kind of, and we'll try to orient it in a positive way, right? Try to bring it into the conversation and orient it in a positive way, because I think there's some meaning there, you know, for me and also you. Like I said, this started as a journal. You know, this was meant to kind of help me work through some of my issues. You know, one thing I want to make sure, and you know, and I make very clear, is that I do not mean by any means to paint myself as if I'm a perfect individual. I know very well that I am not. I'm deeply flawed. I have some parts of me that are hard to control, right? That I work on every single day very intently, very directly. What I'm trying to do, I think, is show people how much work it takes to try to improve yourself. That we have to put actual effort into these things. We have to really try to be good people and lead good lives. We can't just let ourselves run by default, which is what I think a lot of the modern and the materialist worldview is suggesting people do. I think it's a satanic idea. That is exactly what people will tell you that you should do if you follow the Church of Satan. Unrestrain yourself. Let yourself live an unfettered life. That's what you would be told to do. It's not go out and do evil things. It's just live whatever you think is fit. Whatever makes you feel good. Do it. Right? That's exactly, I think, if I had to sum up the materialist worldview, what it is, Some people would say, well, I like to take on the humanist worldview. Well, that's just Christianity without the institution. That's all it is. It's Christian morality. That's all it is. You're taking Christian morality out of Christianity, out of the Western world, and saying it's something different. It's something innate to life, something that we have born within ourselves. That's dangerous because it doesn't properly recognize that morality is a technology. It was created for a purpose. You know what I mean? Anyway, but I bring that up, like I said, because I want to make sure you guys know that I'm not confusing myself with some kind of perfection, right? I know I'm very, very, very imperfect. I just hope that my imperfections can help you guys too, right? In some way, or at least give you a community or some entertainment nonetheless. I like talking about these ideas. I like talking in depth about all this stuff. It's what I think about constantly. And in some ways, it is my therapy to get on here at least every week, if not more, to kind of get some of these ideas out. If I don't, I start to go crazy. And it's full of transparency. I literally start to lose my mind. I have to get these ideas out. It's not a choice. If you have something similar, you better start doing that, right? Like if you have that feeling like you're going to go crazy if you don't do something, do it, man. You know what I mean? Because it's like that's, I think, the universe or God or your soul or whatever telling you you have to do something. You have something very important that if you pass up will could be your destruction, could be your ruin, right? So anyway, with that, that is the Unfounded Podcast signing off. I hope you guys are doing fantastic out there. Have a safe week, and I'll try to be back on here before I move next week. But like I said, I'm going to be a little busy. So if there is a little hiatus here, I'll try to keep you updated on Facebook, okay? And stay safe, guys. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.